Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Andy's Movie and TV, and today we're going over Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man Part 1, featuring the man himself, Andrew Garfield, as the Amazing Spider-Man. And I gotta say, I was always someone who was so close to the Raimi verse and holding on to Tobey Maguire and those characters themselves as being my only version of the Spider-Verse that I was willing to accept. But I gotta say, I think the relationship between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker in this movie heavily outshines, and it's not like this is a hot take at all just to start this video. I don't think anyone would disagree that the romantic emotions shown toward each other throughout both of these movies, compared to the trilogy between Mary Jane and Peter Parker, compared to the Webverse in Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. I keep wanting to call her Gwen Stefani because I listened to way too much, no doubt. That's video for another day. I'm telling you guys. And while most people really only talk about that sense of these films, I get why. I think it's a tad bit overrated because while they are great on screen together and have some wonderful chemistry, those two actors, Garfield and Stone, I think it could have been portrayed more on screen because I think a lot of the weakest parts of both of these movies, the Amazing Spider-Man movies that is, are just parts to where like it needed more character in there. Those are the only two characters in each of these movies that I give a single shit about. I can go ahead and tell you, like, we all know what happens to Uncle Ben in here. It would be like I would be spoiling something for like motherfuckers that were reading the comics in the 60s at this point if I were trying to give you a spoiler alert on what happens to Uncle Ben. So there you go. But I don't give a fuck about Uncle Ben in this movie. I just don't. I know he's portrayed by Martin Sheen, excuse me, the legend himself. I'm having a stroke over here. I just don't really care. I feel like it's a fairly watered down version of the character, and that's a very bland character himself, Uncle Ben. I just feel like it took too long to get into that, and I don't give a damn about Peter's dad really that much. Like, it's kind of interesting, but it added too much government bullshit in there to where, like, I am more just interested in seeing him bit by some spider, and we don't really have to hear about these organizations and they're interested in blank. I just don't give a fuck about that. It reminded me of one of my common complaints you would hear from me talking about sci-fi movies, which I guess Spider-Man is kind of a sci-fi thing if you think about it, but gets to over-explaining certain things and like who wants what, and it works big time with the Oscorp sense of all of this. And while I feel that like Harry Osborn himself should have been introduced in this movie because he is without a doubt the weakest point of the next film, and I hate to keep jumping back and forth, but I just watched both of these films the first time in a while, back and forth, and they're just kind of stuck in my brain, like synced together, obviously. But yeah, while Lizard is, I think he is without a doubt the best of the three characters that were portrayed in the Webverse, of the villains, that is. I apologize. I do feel like his design doesn't really stack up to how well it should. But Spider-Man's suit in this movie, while I'm a Raimi truther, I think this is the best Spider-Man suit we've ever seen live action. Not really a Tom Holland like suit guy. I've never been into any of his suits. I like the one at the end of No Way Home, shown at the like very end when he was going in the snow after like right before the fucking credits roll, and he's in like the new universe thing where no one knows who the fuck he is. Not gonna last long apparently though. Yeah, a lot of the best parts of this movie are heavily reliant on Andrew Garfield, which fair enough, he's Spider-Man, but the parts of him actually roaming the street and looking for Uncle Ben's murderer are phenomenal. But while I can say that much, and him teasing burglars and just making their lives a living hell while checking their hand for that star, I believe it's their left hand actually, he's it leaves it hanging in a manner that it sticks to the message of Uncle Ben, kind of what happened earlier in the film after he fucking jams the basketball. Not Uncle Ben, Spider-Man, imagine. After Spider-Man jams the basketball, like goddamn Shaq had sex with Michael Jordan from the free throw line. And after that happens, he's like, hey, you did that just to get even. That's the kid that punched you, huh? And he admits to it. And before he fucking dies, Uncle Ben, you know, a big part of this movie, a big theme of it is like Peter is doing this for others' good and others' benefit. And while I do not like the way that Uncle Ben was given the line of, however the fuck he says it in this movie, he's like, your dad said somebody who had good traits in him had to pass it on to the next. That's not how he says it, but that's almost how it comes across. It's just ridiculous. Just say the classic fucking line, come the fuck on. We all know exactly where this story is rolling. While I'm not one who loves the Tom Holland trilogy, I do like the fact that we didn't need to run through, like, it's another Uncle Ben trial. And while this was only the second live action one we've ever had, my God, like, if you're a Spider-Man fan, like, you knew exactly where this was going the first time you watched this movie, and it just didn't do anything to, like, break my expectations in a good way. But I gotta say, like, a lot of the action in this movie, while none of it is necessarily groundbreaking, except for the school sequence, where we had that legendary cameo from the legend himself, Stan Lee, one of the creators of the greatest superhero ever, if you ask me, Spider-Man. In the library there, he's listening to the music while Lizard and Spider-Man are getting down back there, smashing through fucking walls and goddamn bookshelves and everything. Probably a couple comics Stan wrote back there. And, Lizard's fucking coming out of the toilet and beating the fuck out of Peter in this movie, and his fucking tail keeps growing back and forth. I'm sorry if I'm cursing too much. I know that I typically only talk about horror movies, so if any of you are younger, I apologize, because I know much younger audience, but I curse a little bit, so there you go. I don't think that this movie is even close to the best Spider-Man movie, but I think it's far from the worst. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I do personally prefer this over the second movie. I think the second movie has got a huge resurgence when, like, just kind of, like, all the TikTokerization of Gwen and Peter's love. Like, you make, like, a short of it. And, like, also the scene of, like, the bridge and obviously what happens at the end of Amazing Spider-Man Part 2. I don't even want to talk about that or just talk about it for a little bit too long. It gets glamorized in a way that it deserves, but they should have given it more screen time, and I think these movies would have felt more special. Because while at the end of this movie, Part 1 that is, I know I'm jumping around, this is for Part 1, I apologize. When Gwen's dad dies, Captain Stacy, he gets, like, fucking clawed right through the gut from the lizard. It doesn't really feel that special to me. And the promise that Peter makes to him, obviously he doesn't hold it very true. So he kind of just died for nothing up there just helping Peter for a second. We all know Spider-Man would have been fine whooping the lizard's ass. He didn't need him up there with that shotgun. Yeah, he was a real like, non-coward, I'll give him that. He didn't want to be the guy that was sitting on the sidelines. He wanted to go up there and help Peter after he helped his daughter. And he told him to hold his fire, but that asshole puts a bullet right in the back of Peter's leg. It's pretty awesome watching a wounded Spider-Man, no matter what, whether it's in Spider-Man 1, the original, 3, the original, or, this here, watching him climb up that building just barely to get up to the lizard. Pretty badass. I don't think that this movie really excels in the way that a lot of people thinks it does. In, like, the comic way, I actually get more laughs from the second movie, believe it or not. While it's kind of more serious in certain ways, the first half of the second movie is a little bit more funny to me than a lot of the moments in this film. There aren't really many quotable lines for me, and I'm not really holding that against Andrew Garfield, because I think he's a pretty on par Peter Parker. I do think Tobey is the greatest Peter Parker ever portrayed on screen. I'll tell you my opinion on Tom Holland another day, because, like I said, I think I mentioned it, we're going to be doing a Spider-Man ranking here soon. But this movie, like I said, very, very far from the best Spider-Man movie, and I have a pretty good amount of complaints with it. Like, I don't understand, like, I feel like some of the financial hardships that Spider-Man should be going through aren't really present in this film, because while it is shown that Uncle Ben has, like, shit for education, he's like, hey, man, I wasn't able to help you with your homework past 10th grade. Now who's fucking stupid, right? But he wasn't able to help him past 10 years old, that was. And, his Aunt May, that is, I keep wanting to say his mom, because his mom and dad are somewhat present in these films after they leave him, after they're doing all that crazy research with Connors and Oscorp. And Well, I don't really dig that at times. It gets to the point where it adds a new layer to the lore where you're not just waiting for Spider-Man to go kick some ass, but we don't really get to that part of Spider-Man trying to provide for his family in any way. And he is in high school in this film. You don't really feel like he's in high school other than the brief moments when he's just having a moment with like just like, okay, let's have a sports moment with Spider-Man. Let's have him throw this football at the goalpost, or let's have him dunk on Flash, like I mentioned, or it wasn't at school earlier, but when he has the skateboard session, that was badass. I almost feel like if they wanted to have Spider-Man do sports in a movie, maybe just focus on one. This almost felt like they were like, hey, everybody will watch this. Like, well, I know, like back in the day, it wasn't so much of a content thing, but it was almost as if like, well, this will swallow up a few minutes, and everybody will think that's kind of cool because people like sports. I love sports. Honestly, like they accumulated my three favorite sports into this movie: basketball, football, and skateboarding into my favorite superhero film, Spider-Man. However, I just feel like it would have been better to focus on one and really get into like maybe like a 10-minute section or even a 20-30 minute section of him being on the basketball team. Maybe Flash could be on it or whatever you want to do there. I think it could have been like maybe exploring some new regions that none of these movies really did anything with. I think all we really see here that's exploring new ground is simply the acting that is done by Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. I think the script writing is fairly meh. I don't think there are many lines in here that really are that memorable. It's like it kind of goes back to the same thing. Like there aren't many things that make me laugh in this film. Maybe I'm just kind of forgetting them. There are more moments that make me just be like, "Fuck yeah, that's Spider-Man," or New York in this film is actually portrayed in a better way than I remember. I don't think it stacks up to the Raimiverse. We'll get to that in the ranking. I hate to keep comparing. I just love Spider-Man movies. When, he helps the little kid out and gives him his Spider-Man mask, and he needs it. He feels like he needs to give it to him, so he'll have the confidence to climb up as if he is Spider-Man up through the burning SUV, hanging through the goddamn bridge. And also the cranes towards the end of the film, like towards the very end of the film, after that guy, his kid has been saved by Spider-Man in that sequence we just spoke about, he feels obligated to help this guy. Whoever's behind this mask, he knows he's a New Yorker who's a good person who is willing to help his kid. And he's a big reason because apparently Andrew Garfield is just shooting fucking blanks. He was about to smash into nothing. But luckily these cranes were here to help after he gets that bullet put in his ass. And I enjoyed that moment. I actually enjoy the moment with the kid there a lot more than I do in the last sequence of the second movie. We'll talk about that sequence at some point. I'm not a fan of that last act of that Amazing Spider-Man 2 at all. But guys, this movie, while I have a few things to complain about it, it's a goddamn Spider-Man movie. It's a little bit of a base level Spider-Man movie. I don't really feel like we needed to go through the 30 minutes of talking about the bullshit with his dad and he put his own DNA into these spiders. Freaky motherfucker. I don't know, guys. I think there was definitely some questionable script writing that should have been looked at a second time. The lizard, just the way he looks, isn't great. But I think the actual choreography of the fights in these movies, both of them, especially this one, I think with the lizard is great. Even though they don't have, other than the library sequence, I don't know. It just, for some reason, it doesn't really strike me in the same way that any of those Raimiverse films, or even a lot of the fights in No Way Home did. I don't know what it is, but I will say this. I do think the suit in this movie and the web slinging in Amazing Spider-Man Part 2, something about this webverse really got the suit in this film specifically and the web slinging in both films specifically on point. I don't know if they wanted that to just be great, but they got it. And I'll say this much, I don't really think that the villains are very good in the webverse. The Lizard is awesome. I love the Lizard. I think he was portrayed the best on screen, way better than anyone else was in these films out of the other three in the next movie. I don't want to keep comparing these movies back and forth, but it's just so tough too. My two biggest complaints with this movie is part one, the Lizard, as great as he is portrayed, and he seems lethal as a motherfucker and sticks his claws right through goddamn Captain Stacy later in the movie, And, you know, he turns those fucking cops into lizards, even though it is reversed later. I don't think that he really does enough to the city, even though he's not trying to really hurt everyone. He's trying to turn everyone into these lizards who he somehow in his mind perceives that, you know, it would work out great. Everyone's, you know, he's obviously become a goddamn madman. He's a lizard, and it's taking over his mind after Peter gave him that goddamn formula. And he just wants his arm back, and after it just does not go to plan whatsoever. He's lurking down in these sewers and shit. I love all of that. I just don't think he seems like a real threat to this city. And while we all know the end to a Spider-Man movie, these are typically made for kids and nerds like me and you, losers. It's honestly like we know Spider-Man is going to prevail in the end. When you tell me that the Lizard's plan is to turn all of New York, like the biggest fucking city in all the lands, into lizards, it's just like, bro, that ain't going to happen. And if it did happen, I would probably walk out right now and call you a bullshitter. Because I don't know about it. I never really bought into his motive whatsoever. And even if I did, he doesn't seem dangerous enough. Secondly, I really just wish we could have saw Peter get his hands on the murder of Ben Parker. Like, well, I said I could give a fuck about what happens to this Uncle Ben. I think it was just a fairly done version of the great concept of the Spider-Man story. And just kind of that copy and paste from the comic books that we would all expect. Didn't give a fuck, but I still want to see him get his hands on this greaseball motherfucker who tosses him that milk after he fucking robs the cashier. That's not my policy, he says. Fucking Uncle Ben catches a bullet right in the gut. And I don't know, I just thought instead of him having that moment on the bridge after he saves the little boy and he looks at his mask afterward, kind of realizing after what Uncle Ben had said earlier, you know, like, hey, you're doing this just to get even. And also, kind of from what the cops are saying about him, how Captain Stacy is saying, like, this Spider-Man dude, he's got a motive the same way these other criminals do. He's got a vendetta against these criminals. He only attacks a certain kind of guy, and that's true. I like that. I just wish he could have learned that other than people just saying exactly that kind of dialogue to him. You know, Tobey Maguire literally had to murder murder the poor dude who was teaming up with Sandman, and unfortunately he didn't get away the same way that this son of a bitch with a star in his hand did. I don't know. It's a personal preference thing. The guy got away alive, but we know that eventually Andrew gets to be quite the dark Spider-Man from what's kind of mentioned in No Way Home's dialogue there that we all want to see so fucking bad in Amazing Spider-Man 3. I'm not even the Webverse guy. I don't know if he'd have anything to do with those movies. But go ahead and make Amazing Spider-Man 3. God damn. And I also think this movie, like, well, it spends too much time at Oscorp. It's all talking at a fairly, like, base level science type of thing. So it's fine. None of it gets, like, confusing or anything. I just think more time could have been spent with characters making them feel special. Or, like I said, introducing goddamn Harry or even bringing in Norman Osborn. He's just brought in for the next film to fucking die. I don't know. There were some oddball choices made here. I actually think it has somewhat of an underrated score. I really love the moment where it's like a goddamn horror movie all of a sudden when the lizard breaks in there to Oscorp in his last fucking moment in there before going to jail forever. And he's trying to get that, whatever that fucking crazy-ass lizard shit is, while, what's her name? Gwen is making the antidote. She's spraying that fucking fire on his hand. Whatever that sound is, almost seems like a goddamn John Carpenter movie there at first. He busts in there, but he's not even looking for her. I think this movie's pretty kick-ass, guys. I enjoy the ending quite a bit. I don't like the way they use Captain Stacy's death as like a ghost for Peter later on. It's way too on the nose. And it's like, we get it. And it leads to a lot of flashbacks that I don't dig that we'll get into a review of the next film in another day. We're going to get into the rankings soon enough. I think I'm going to go ahead and give this film a solid 6.5 out of 10. I think I've rambled on enough about this movie for today, guys. I just love Spider-Man so fucking much, and I'm hyped for that new movie coming out next month, that is. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be Grey Hulk he's fighting. I would love to see one of the symbiotes get involved. I want to see Venom or Carnage. I love Carnage. If you guys don't know anything about me, I love me some good Carnage. and he got done so fucking dirty in that Venom Part 2 movie. I just wish that, and it's not going to be him, I just heard that Tom Holland say that, you know, the real villain has yet to be revealed. So how badass would it be if we could just get an actual symbiote type of action? Or, you know, it doesn't even have to be a symbiote. Like, there are a lot of great villains that we could see put on screen. Give us goddamn Andrew Garfield coming in from an alternate universe. I know we're all sick of, you know, like the multiverse at this point, but, you know, this is an Amazing Spider-Man video, and we all love Andrew Garfield. I almost called him Tom Garfield. That would have been bad. I'm going to go ahead and end it here, guys. Let me know what you guys think of this movie. If you have any recommendations for me, horror, action, comedy, whatever, I'll watch it. Have a hell of a day, my friends.